Life in Spanish Texas. Mission life. Life in the missions and settlements was complex because different groups living in the same small area had different needs and viewpoints. Sometimes those needs conflicted. Native Americans saw the world one way, and the Spanish saw it another way. The friars were interested in converting Native Americans to Christianity and a Spanish way of life. Many Native Americans, however, had no interest in becoming Christians or giving up their own ways of life to live in missions. However, some Native Americans did adapt to a regulated life of work and prayer at the missions. Friars and the Native Americans. The mission friars had devoted their lives to the service of the Roman Catholic Church as it existed in Spain. In order to carry out this duty, they left their homeland to spread their religion in a foreign land. Within the mission, their daily lives were routine and well ordered. They had set times of day to pray, eat, relax, and study. It was the job of the friars to bring Native Americans into the mission so they would adapt its routine of work, prayer, and meals. Friars were expected to teach Native Americans the Spanish language and Spanish customs, farming, ranching, as well as trades such as masonry, blacksmithing, pottery making, and weaving. Most importantly, mission friars were expected to make the Native American people accept the Catholic religion as their own and be baptized. Friars also provided for the religious needs of the soldiers in the Presidio and the Spanish settlers. Native Americans were not forced to live at a mission. Many agreed to for protection from their enemies. At times, they might leave the mission to take part in traditional practices such as their own cultural events, hunting, or trading with other Native Americans. However, while there, they followed the mission routine. They began the day with prayer and religious instruction and afterward gathered for breakfast. Then it was time to work, farming, tending livestock, or learning a trade or craft. At noon, they gathered for lunch and rested, and then returned to work until sundown. After more religious practice, they ate and then slept. The question of how to treat the Native Americans was often a source of tension between the friars and the soldiers. They differed in their views of whether to use force or to be more accommodating with the Native Americans. The mission staff often felt that the soldiers had a poor relationship with the Native Americans. At first, this caused the presidios to be built at some distance from the mission. If the mission was under attack, though, the soldiers were then too far away to help in time. Also, the isolation could sometimes prevent the friars and the soldiers from working well together. A soldier's life. A soldier's life alternated between excitement and boredom. His chief task was to protect the mission and settlers from attacks by the French and raids by Native Americans. Although Native Americans were not forced to enter the missions, soldiers were sometimes sent out to help bring back people, even entire groups who left. This usually meant searching through the wilderness. Soldiers also conducted supply trains, escorted groups of settlers, and carried the mail. The rest of their time was spent in routine tasks, such as tending horses and maintaining the presidio. Soldiers also spent long hours on guard duty. Soldiers' pay was low, and it was often laid due to the isolated location of the presidios. Soldiers had to buy their own uniforms, guns, ammunition, and food. Often they paid their commanding officers for these items. The officers overcharged the soldiers, forcing them to stay in the army to pay off their debt. Settlements and a new heritage. Settlers were often the wives and children of the soldiers. Along with their wives and families, off-duty soldiers farmed, raised livestock, and ran ranches. As settlements grew, they attracted craft workers and merchants. Some settlements hired teachers. In San Antonio, Mexican settlers hired teachers and founded the community's first school. While medicine was very basic, officials did try to protect public health by banning the dumping of trash and using the drinking water for washing or laundering. The story of the Spanish colonial period is also the story of Texas diversity. In early Spanish settlements, races and cultures mingled and mixed. People of Spanish, Mexican, Native American, and African ancestry intermarried and raised children who were then of mixed heritage. Through language, custom, and tradition, all of these cultures came to influence Texas. As settlements grew, people of Mexican heritage came to consider Texas home. The locations of many missions were far enough from Mexico that residents began to develop a unique culture. Over time, these Mexicans in Texas were referred to as Tejanos. Elements of Tejano culture that developed in this period surface in Mexican Texas literature, art, music, and food. Tejano culture continues to be a strong influence throughout Texas to this day. Also among the settlers were mestizos, people of mixed Spanish and Native American heritage. Some mestizos were children of Spanish soldiers who married Native Americans and settled in Texas. There were also African Americans in Spanish colonial Texas, both enslaved and free. Although the wealthy and some high-ranking officials brought enslaved Africans for household work, the widespread practice of slavery to produce field crops had not yet developed in Texas. Some African Americans were free farmers, property owners, and tradesmen. Their cultures and experiences would also contribute to the diversity of Texas. Life for Native Americans. Various groups of Native Americans lived in Texas during the Spanish colonial era. Some, like the Colonial, were nomadic and traveled to areas to hunt and gather food. Other groups, like the Apache and Comanche, were warrior cultures. Their use of horses let them travel farther and faster and gave them advantages in battle. The main reason some Native Americans agreed to live in missions was for protection from enemies. Apache and other warrior groups were less likely to attack people within missions and protected by presidios. Missions also gave Native peoples a greater and more dependable supply of food. As Native Americans adapted to mission life, they tried to maintain their own traditions. For example, by hunting and trading with other Native peoples. Native American disinterest and disease were two factors in the failure of many missions. Sometimes Native Americans decided that the food and security offered by the missions did not outweigh the advantages of their traditional lifestyles. Many others became sick with European diseases imported by the Spanish. Deaths due to disease kept many missions from growing.